Millionaire paid his maid $500K to be his wife for 7 months, but he never expected this. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. The fluorescent lights in James Mitchell's corner office cast harsh shadows across scattered legal documents. The clock on his mahogany desk read 12:47 a.m., but sleep felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. His company, Heartwarming Solutions, worth $47 million just 6 months ago, now hung by a thread. James rubbed his temples, staring at the lawsuit papers for the 100th time. His former business partner, David Chen, claimed Heartwarming had stolen the cardiac monitoring software that made their company successful. The evidence looked damning, even though James knew the truth. His phone buzzed. Attorney Margaret Walsh. Despite the late hour, Margaret's voice crackled through the speaker. James, I've been reviewing Judge Murphy's comments from today's hearing. Well, honestly, what's the verdict? James's voice carried 18 months of exhaustion. Listen, the judge specifically mentioned personal reliability. Your dating disasters have become business liabilities. That mess with Victoria last month made page 6 again. James winced, remembering the photos. Another relationship that crashed and burned spectacularly. Another round of gossip columns painting him as Boston's most eligible disaster. Margaret continued. Judge Murphy wants to see mature leadership. She said, and I quote, a man who can't maintain stable personal relationships might struggle with fiduciary responsibility. Are you serious right now? My love life affects my company's legal standing. James, you've had 3 public breakups in 18 months. The last one involved a restraining order and tabloid coverage. The court sees instability. The weight of those words settled into James's chest. Everything he'd built, every late night, every innovation that could help cardiac patients worldwide, threatened by his personal failures. So what are you saying, Margaret? I'm saying you have 7 months to prove you're a stable, mature leader. Find a way to show Judge Murphy you've grown up. Marriage would be ideal. But honestly, even a long-term relationship would help. James stared out his window at the Boston skyline, lights twinkling like distant possibilities. Somewhere out there was a solution he couldn't yet see. Margaret's voice softened. James, you're brilliant. Your technology saves lives. Don't let your personal life destroy everything you've worked for. After hanging up, James sat in the silence of his office, surrounded by patents and prototypes that represented his life's work. 7 months to prove he wasn't the irresponsible playboy the media portrayed. 7 months to save everything that mattered. 3 hours later, across the city in a cramped Cambridge apartment, Sarah Reynolds stood in her tiny kitchen, medical bills spread across the scratched table. Her phone call had just ended, but her hand still trembled as she set it down. The conversation with Dr. Martinez echoed in her mind. Tommy's name had finally reached the top of the kidney transplant list after 18 months of waiting. A perfect match had become available, but the hospital's new policy required payment guarantees for post-surgical care. $485,000. Due Friday morning, 72 hours from now. Sarah looked at her bank statement. 2,147s. Her nursing salary at Boston General barely covered their basic expenses, and her weekend housekeeping jobs added just enough to keep Tommy's medical insurance active. She walked quietly down the narrow hallway to Tommy's room. At 16, her brother had handled his kidney disease with more maturity than most adults, but she could see the toll it was taking. His face, once round with teenage fullness, had grown gaunt. His energy, once boundless, now came in careful, measured doses. He was awake, reading on his tablet, connected to the portable dialysis machine that had become his constant companion. "Hey, you okay?" Tommy's voice carried concern that broke Sarah's heart, even facing his own medical crisis. He worried about her. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his blanket with the automatic care of someone who'd been both sister and mother for the past 8 years. Tommy studied her face. That was Dr. Martinez, wasn't it? About the kidney. Sarah nodded, trying to keep her expression hopeful. There's good news and challenging news. Give me the real version, not the little kid version. Sometimes Sarah forgot that kidney disease had aged Tommy beyond his years. The real version is that a perfect kidney match became available. The surgery could happen this week. Tommy's eyes lit up with the first genuine excitement she'd seen in months. Seriously, this week? The challenging part is that the hospital needs a payment guarantee for the surgery and follow-up care. It's a lot of money, T. How much money? Sarah took a deep breath. $485,000. Tommy's excitement faded as quickly as it had appeared. He was 16, not 6. He understood exactly what $485,000 meant to their family. Oh my gosh, Tommy whispered. That's impossible. Sarah took his hand, squeezing gently. Nothing's impossible. I'm going to figure this out. Sarah, we don't have rich relatives. We don't have college funds or family businesses. We have your nursing job and weekend cleaning gigs. The brutal honesty in Tommy's voice made Sarah's chest tighten. He was right, of course. They'd been scraping by for years, ever since their parents died in a car accident when Tommy was 8 and Sarah was 20. Listen to me, Tommy Reynolds. I have been taking care of you for 8 years, and I'm not stopping now. Dr. Martinez said we have until Friday morning. That gives me 72 hours to find a solution. But Sarah, no buts. You remember what Dad used to say about Reynolds' family stubborn? Tommy smiled weakly. That we're too stubborn to know when we're beat. Exactly. And I am nowhere near beat yet. Sarah kissed Tommy's forehead, tasting the salt of tears she hadn't realized were falling. As she turned off his light and closed the door, her mind raced through impossible calculations. 72 hours, $485,000. Somewhere in Boston, there had to be a solution. There had to be. Monday morning arrived with October chill that seemed to seep through every window in the Beacon Hill mansion. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter as she climbed the servants' entrance steps, her breath visible in small puffs. For 18 months, she'd maintained the same schedule. Mondays at 5 a.m., while James Mitchell was safely at his gym or his office, anywhere but home. She preferred it that way. Invisible work for an invisible employee. But today, lights blazed from the kitchen windows. Sarah hesitated, key in hand. In 18 months, she'd never encountered James on a Monday morning. Her carefully constructed invisibility was about to be shattered. The kitchen door opened before she could decide whether to retreat. Sarah, James Mitchell stood in the doorway, looking as surprised as she felt. His usually perfect business attire was wrinkled, his tie loosened. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Oh goodness, I'm so sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I didn't expect. I can come back later. Sarah stepped backward, but James held up a hand. No, please. I'm the one intruding on your schedule. I just couldn't sleep. For 18 months, their interactions had been limited to brief nods and polite thank yous. Now, standing in his kitchen doorway, Sarah noticed details she'd never allowed herself to see. The exhaustion in his green eyes. The way his usually confident posture sagged with some invisible weight. Are you okay, sir? The question slipped out before Sarah could stop it. She'd always maintained professional distance, but something in his appearance triggered her nursing instincts. James blinked, as if the question surprised him. When was the last time anyone had asked him that? Well, honestly, it's been a rough night. Legal issues with the company. Sarah nodded politely, unsure how to respond. She knew virtually nothing about James Mitchell's business, only that he was successful enough to own a mansion in Boston's most expensive neighborhood. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everything works out. She moved toward the utility closet where she kept her cleaning supplies, but James's voice stopped her. Sarah, Are you all right? You look worried about something. The question caught her off guard. In 18 months, James Mitchell had never asked her a personal question. She wasn't even sure he knew her name until this moment. "I'm fine, thank you." But her voice cracked slightly on the word fine, betraying the weight of Tommy's situation. James noticed immediately. "Are you sure? You seem upset." Sarah's carefully constructed professional composure wavered. The stress of Tommy's deadline, combined with the unexpected kindness in James's voice, made her feel dangerously close to tears. "It's just family medical issues. Nothing that concerns you, Mr. Mitchell." James stepped closer, his expression shifting from polite concern to genuine interest. "Medical issues. My brother needs surgery. It's complicated." Sarah turned toward her supplies again, desperate to end this conversation before she revealed too much. But James's next words froze her completely. "What kind of surgery?" The question was gentle, but something in his tone made Sarah look up. James was watching her with an intensity she'd never seen before. "Kidney transplant. He's been on the waiting list for 18 months. James went very still. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, concern. Sarah couldn't identify the emotion, but it was profound. "Tommy Reynolds," James said quietly. 16 years old. Boston Children's Hospital. Sarah's breath caught. "How do you—" James's voice became even softer. "You read to him every Tuesday afternoon. Alice in Wonderland. You always sit in the blue chair by the window. Oh my gosh. How could you possibly know that? I've seen you there. I visit the Children's Hospital regularly. My company donates cardiac monitors to the pediatric unit." Sarah stared at him, trying to process this information. She'd noticed a tall man in expensive suits occasionally walking through the wards, but she'd never connected him to her employer. "You remember Tommy?" James nodded slowly. "I remember his laugh when you do the Mad Hatter voice. I remember how his face lights up when you walk into the room. And I remember thinking I'd never seen anyone care for someone else so completely." The unexpected intimacy of his observation made Sarah's cheeks warm. This was the longest conversation they'd ever had, and certainly the most personal. "Mr. Mitchell, James," he corrected gently. "And Sarah, what's Tommy's current situation?" Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her to maintain professional boundaries, but something in James's manner invited trust. A kidney became available. Perfect match, but the hospital needs payment guarantees for the surgery and aftercare. How much? $485,000. Due Friday morning. James absorbed this information without flinching. "Sarah, that's a substantial amount. I know it's impossible, but I have to try." James studied her face, seeing something that made him make a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Sarah, what if I told you it wasn't impossible?" She looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Mr. Mitchell, James, I appreciate the thought, but what if I told you there might be a way to help Tommy and solve my legal problems at the same time?" Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "I don't understand." James took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "What if I told you I needed a wife?" The words hung in the air between them like something impossible and fragile. Sarah stared at James, certain she'd misunderstood. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" James ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "This is going to sound insane. Most things do at 5:30 in the morning." Despite the surreal situation, James smiled at her dry humor. "That's exactly why this might work. Mr. Mitchell, James, I think you should probably get some sleep before—" "Sarah, I'm completely serious. I need to appear stable and mature for legal reasons. You need money for Tommy's surgery." "We could solve both problems." Sarah leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to process what she was hearing. "Are you actually suggesting a marriage contract? Temporary, 7 months. Specifically, this is crazy. Marriage contracts don't exist in real life. They do when both people have everything to lose and everything to gain. James moved to the kitchen table, gesturing for Sarah to sit. His manner shifted into something more businesslike, which somehow made the impossible proposal seem slightly more real. Here's my situation. My former business partner is suing me for patent theft. It's not true, but the evidence looks bad. The judge handling the case has made it clear that she questions my judgment and stability. Because of your dating life. James winced. Because of my spectacularly public relationship disasters. Yes. Judge Murphy thinks a man who can't maintain personal relationships might be irresponsible with corporate responsibilities. And you think marriage would fix that? I think marriage to the right person would demonstrate that I've matured, that I'm capable of commitment and stability. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But why me? You could marry any socialite in Boston tomorrow. James was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because when I see you with Tommy, I see someone who understands what actually matters. Because you're genuine in a way that most people in my social circle aren't. And because you're desperate enough to consider this insane proposal. James's expression softened, and because I trust you. The simple statement carried unexpected weight. Sarah found herself believing him, which made the situation even more surreal. What would this contract involve, exactly? You'd move into the east wing of the house. We'd appear together at business functions and social events. To the outside world, we'd be a happily married couple. And privately, we'd be business partners. You'd maintain your own space, your own life. The only requirement would be public appearances as needed. Sarah's nursing background had taught her to ask practical questions. And financially, $485,000 deposited in your account today for Tommy's surgery. An additional $300,000 when our contract ends in 7 months. Sarah's breath caught. The numbers were so far beyond her reality that they felt fictional. James, this is absolutely insane. I know. It's manipulative and weird and probably illegal. It's definitely ethically questionable. And you're certain this would solve your legal problems. My lawyer seems to think marriage would demonstrate stability. And honestly, Sarah, I'm running out of options. Sarah stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the mansion's small garden. Everything about this conversation defied logic and common sense. Why should I trust you? How do I know you won't change the terms once I've agreed? James pulled out his phone, scrolling to a contact. Because my lawyer will draft a contract that protects both of us. Because the money for Tommy will be in an escrow account that I can't touch. Because this only works if you feel secure. He paused, then added something that surprised them both. And because 18 months ago, when I first saw you reading to Tommy, I thought you were the most genuine person I'd ever encountered. I still think that... Sarah turned from the window to study his face. In the growing morning light, James Mitchell looked less like a wealthy CEO and more like a man who had run out of conventional solutions. If I agreed to this completely insane proposal, what would happen to Tommy? James's expression grew earnest. Tommy gets the best medical care money can buy, not just the surgery, but the best follow-up care, the best specialists, the best everything, no matter what happens between us. You'd put that in the contract. I'd put it in the contract. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to imagine explaining this to Tommy. Her 16-year-old brother, wise beyond his years but still fundamentally trusting. James, this is the craziest thing anyone has ever suggested to me. I know, it's probably going to end badly for both of us. Probably. But it might save Tommy's life. It will save Tommy's life. Sarah opened her eyes and looked directly at James Mitchell. For the first time in 18 months of cleaning his house, she really saw him. Not the wealthy employer, not the successful businessman, but a man who was as desperate as she was. If I say yes, when would this Arrangement. Begin. James glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall. It's Monday morning. Tommy's surgery is scheduled for Friday if we can guarantee payment. We could have the contract signed and the money transferred by Wednesday. That fast? Sarah, when you've got 72 hours to save someone's life, fast is the only option. The truth of that statement settled between them. Time was the enemy for both of them. Tommy's medical window and James's legal deadline. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to step off the edge of the world. What would I tell people, my friends, my co-workers, that you fell in love with your employer and decided life was too short to worry about conventional expectations? And Tommy, you tell Tommy whatever feels right. He's smart enough to understand that sometimes life requires creative solutions. Sarah laughed, a sound that was equal parts humor and hysteria. Creative solutions. That's one way to describe a marriage contract. Sarah, I want you to know that I understand how insane this sounds. If you say no, I'll transfer money for Tommy's surgery anyway. No strings attached. The offer took Sarah completely by surprise. You'd do that, even if I don't agree to your proposal. James nodded. Tommy deserves a chance at a healthy life. That shouldn't depend on whether you're willing to help me with my legal problems. The generosity of the gesture, combined with the sincerity in his voice, tipped something in Sarah's decision-making process. James, if we do this, we're going to need some ground rules. Does that mean you're considering it? It means I'm probably as desperate and crazy as you are. James smiled, and for the first time since their conversation began, he looked hopeful. So, what are your ground rules? Sarah Reynolds. First rule. Tommy's medical care is the top priority. Always. Agreed. Second rule. This arrangement ends in exactly 7 months, no matter what happens. Agreed. Third rule. We're honest with each other. No games, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. James hesitated for just a moment. Agreed. Sarah studied his face, noting that tiny hesitation. Already, she wondered what she might be missing. Last rule, if either of us wants out before 7 months, we can end it. No penalties, no recriminations. That one's harder to agree to, James admitted. If I back out, I lose my company. If I back out, Tommy still gets his surgery. You already promised that. James nodded slowly. Agreed. Sarah felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump into something that could either save them or destroy them both. James Mitchell, are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do? Sarah Reynolds, are you? She thought of Tommy, connected to his dialysis machine, trying to maintain hope despite impossible odds. She thought of her parents, who had always taught her that family came before everything else. She thought of the next 72 hours and what they could bring. Yes, she said quietly. Yes, I think I am. James extended his hand to her. Partners? Sarah shook his hand, feeling the calluses that proved he wasn't just a wealthy businessman, but someone who still worked with his hands. Partners, she agreed. As their hands separated, both Sarah and James realized they had just stepped into something that would change their lives in ways neither could predict. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the kitchen windows of the Beacon Hill mansion. Somewhere across the city, Tommy Reynolds was waking up to what might be his last week on dialysis, and in a kitchen that had hosted 18 months of careful professional distance, two strangers had just agreed to become husband and wife. The Boston Children's Hospital pediatric wing buzzed with its usual mixture of hope and controlled chaos. Sarah sat beside Tommy's bed, holding the marriage contract that would change their lives. Her brother, despite being connected to the portable dialysis machine, was sitting up straight, alert as always when something important was happening. Tommy, I need to explain something to you, and I need you to listen carefully. Her 16-year-old brother studied her face with the serious expression that kidney disease had given him too early. This is about the surgery money, isn't it? It's about a solution that's unconventional. Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to explain the most surreal 24 hours of her life. You know Mr. Mitchell, the man I work for, the one with the big house in Beacon Hill, the rich guy who never talks to you? Well, it turns out he has talked to me, and he has a proposition. Tommy's eyebrows rose. That sounds either really good or really sketchy. Probably both, Sarah admitted. Tommy, Mr. Mitchell, has legal problems that require him to appear stable and married. I have medical bills that require more money than I could make in 10 years. Oh my gosh, Sarah. You're not saying what I think you're saying. I'm saying James Mitchell has offered to pay for your surgery and follow-up care in exchange for a 7-month marriage contract. Tommy stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Are you serious right now? You're going to marry your boss to pay for my kidney transplant. It's not a real marriage. It's a business arrangement. I move into his house. We appear at some fancy events together. And after 7 months, we get divorced. Tommy's laughter faded as he processed the implications. Sarah, this sounds like something from a romance novel. Trust me, there's nothing romantic about it. It's purely practical. But Tommy was 16, not 6, and his expression grew thoughtful. Sarah, rich guys don't marry their housekeepers for legal respectability. There are thousands of women in Boston who would marry him tomorrow. Maybe, but he asked me, why do you think that is? Sarah had been asking herself the same question since James's proposal. Because I'm convenient, because I need the money badly enough to agree, or because he's been watching you read to me for 18 months and he's developed feelings he doesn't want to admit. Tommy, that's ridiculous. Is it? Sarah, you said he knew my name, my age, which hospital I'm in. You said he remembered specific details about your reading sessions. He visits the hospital for business. His company donates equipment. Tommy gave her the look that meant he was about to share wisdom that made her uncomfortable. Sarah, rich guys who donate equipment send their assistants to do hospital visits. They don't personally walk through pediatric wards, remembering which nurses read, which stories to which kids. Sarah shifted in her chair. Tommy, you're reading too much into this. Am I? What else did he say when he proposed this contract? He said when he saw me with you, he saw someone who understood what actually mattered. Tommy nodded as if this confirmed his theory. And he said I was genuine in a way that most people in his social circle weren't. Tommy's smile widened. Sarah, the man has been falling for you for 18 months. That's absolutely not what's happening here. Then why did he offer to pay for my surgery, even if you said no to the marriage contract? Sarah paused. She'd been so focused on the practical aspects of James's proposal that she hadn't fully considered the implications of his no-strings-attached offer. He did say that, didn't he? Tommy reached over and took her hand. Sarah, I've been sick for 2 years. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, watching people, and I've learned to recognize when someone cares about someone else. Tommy, this is just business, maybe for you, but I don't think it's just business for him. Sarah looked around the hospital room that had become too familiar over the past 18 months. The pale green walls, the constantly beeping monitors, the smell of disinfectant that she could never quite get used to. TA, does any of this matter? The surgery is Friday if we can make the payment guarantee. That's what's important. Tommy squeezed her hand. Sarah, you've been taking care of me since I was 8 years old. You've given up college, relationships, your own life, to make sure I was okay. You're my brother. That's what family does. But maybe it's time for someone to take care of you for a change. The gentleness in Tommy's voice made Sarah's chest tighten. She'd spent so many years being the strong one, the responsible one, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Tommy, this arrangement isn't about anyone taking care of me. It's about saving your life. Maybe it can be about both. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Martinez entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression he used for important updates. Good morning, Sarah. Tommy, I have news about the kidney availability. Sarah's heartbeat quickened. Please tell me it's still available. It is, but we need to move quickly. The donor surgery is scheduled for Thursday morning, which means Tommy's transplant would be Thursday afternoon. That's tomorrow, Sarah said, her voice tight with sudden panic. Dr. Martinez nodded. I know it's faster than we expected, but this kidney is a perfect match. Tommy's labs look excellent. If we have payment confirmation, I'd like to admit him this afternoon for pre-surgical preparation. Sarah looked at Tommy, then back at Dr. Martinez. We'll have payment confirmation by this afternoon. Dr. Martinez smiled. Excellent. Tommy, how are you feeling about this? Tommy grinned, and for a moment he looked like the healthy teenager he should have been. I'm ready, Dr. Martinez. I've been ready for 18 months. After Dr. Martinez left, Sarah pulled out her phone to call James. The marriage contract suddenly felt very real and very immediate. Sarah? James answered on the first ring. The surgery is tomorrow afternoon. Can you have the contracts and money ready by this afternoon? Already done. My lawyer has been working since yesterday. We can sign everything at the hospital if that's easier. James, are you absolutely sure about this? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sarah, I'm sure about Tommy getting his surgery. I'm sure about helping your family. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. After she hung up, Tommy was watching her with a knowing expression. What are you smiling about? Tommy's grin was wider than she'd seen in months. I'm smiling because tomorrow I'm getting a new kidney, and you're getting a husband who's already half in love with you. Tommy Reynolds. That's the medication talking. Sarah, that's the truth talking. Despite her protests, Sarah found herself smiling too. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tommy would begin his journey back to health, and she would step into a life she couldn't even imagine. It was terrifying and hopeful and completely unprecedented. It was, she realized, exactly what they needed. 3 hours later, Sarah Reynolds became Sarah Mitchell in a brief ceremony in the hospital chapel with Tommy as their witness and Dr. Martinez signing as their second witness. The rings were simple gold bands purchased from the hospital gift shop. The vows were the standard legal language for marriage contracts. But when James slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger and said, "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Mitchell," something in his voice made it sound less like a business transaction and more like a promise. Tommy, watching from his wheelchair, whispered to Dr. Martinez, "This is going to be interesting." And in the small hospital chapel, surrounded by the sounds of healing and hope, two desperate people became something they'd never expected to be, married. 2 days after Tommy's successful surgery, Sarah stood in the doorway of what James had called her space in the East Wing, completely overwhelmed. The renovation had been completed while she spent 48 hours at the hospital, and the transformation took her breath away. The former guest suite had been converted into a private apartment that felt more like a home than anywhere she'd lived since her parents died. A small library lined one wall, filled with medical journals, classic novels, and what looked like every children's book ever written. The kitchenette featured professional-grade appliances sized for 1 or 2 people, with a breakfast bar that overlooked the mansion's private garden. But it was the third room that made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. James had created a complete medical recovery suite for Tommy, with hospital-grade equipment, a comfortable bed with adjustable positioning, and entertainment systems that rivaled the pediatric wing at Boston Children's Hospital. Sarah heard footsteps and turned to find James watching her from the hallway, coffee mug in hand, looking uncertain. "I hope it's okay," he said quietly. "I had the contractors working around the clock while you were at the hospital. James, this is—" Sarah struggled to find words. "This is incredible, but you didn't have to do all this." "I wanted Tommy to be comfortable during his recovery. The doctor said he'll need careful monitoring for the next 6 weeks," Sarah walked through the medical room, noting details that could only have been planned by someone who understood exactly what post-transplant care required. A medication refrigerator, a scale for daily weight monitoring, even a comfortable chair positioned so she could sleep nearby during Tommy's first weeks home. "You researched kidney transplant recovery," she realized. "I may have spent some time reading medical journals. James, this equipment costs more than I make in a year." James set down his coffee mug and moved closer. "Sarah, money spent on Tommy's health isn't an expense. It's an investment in his future." The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's chest tighten. Over the past week, she'd seen glimpses of a man very different from the wealthy businessman she'd imagined for 18 months. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me. This is what family does for each other." The word family hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to examine. "Speaking of family," James continued, "I thought we should establish some routines, figure out how this is going to work day to day." "Routines?" "Well, we're married now. People are going to expect us to act like we actually know each other." Sarah laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise them both. "That's a good point. What do married people do?" "I have no idea. I've never been married before." "Neither have I." They stood there for a moment, two people who had entered into marriage without any understanding of how marriage actually worked. "Coffee?" James suggested. "Married people probably drink coffee together." "That sounds reasonable." 20 minutes later, they sat at the breakfast bar in Sarah's new kitchenette, learning the basics of each other's morning preferences. James liked his coffee black. Sarah preferred cream and sugar. James read the financial news. Sarah checked medical journals. James was naturally quiet in the morning. Sarah was a gentle conversationalist. "This is nice," Sarah admitted, surprising herself. "It is, isn't it? Very domestic. Very married." They smiled at each other across the breakfast bar, and for a moment, the artificial nature of their arrangement felt less important than the comfortable reality of sharing morning coffee. James's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and frowned. "Problem?" Sarah asked. "Margaret wants us to attend a charity function next week. Heart Foundation Gala. Apparently, being seen together publicly will help demonstrate stability to the court." "What kind of charity function?" "The type where people wear expensive clothes and write large checks for good causes." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. "James, I don't have expensive clothes. We'll take care of that. But Sarah, you should know that these events can be intense. Lots of reporters, lots of gossip, lots of people asking personal questions." "What kind of personal questions?" "How we met, how long we've been together, when we decided to get married." Sarah realized she hadn't considered the performative aspect of their arrangement. "What are we going to tell people?" "The truth, mostly. We'll say we met through your work, that I fell for you gradually, and that Tommy's medical situation made us realize life was too short to wait." "That's pretty close to what actually happened." James paused, coffee mug halfway to his lips. "Yeah, it is, isn't it?" Their eyes met across the small table, and Sarah felt something shift between them. The story they were going to tell the world wasn't entirely false, which made their arrangement feel less like a business transaction and more like something else. "James, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Yesterday, at the hospital, you told Dr. Martinez that Tommy was your family now. You meant that, didn't you?" James was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, I've never had a family. My parents died when I was in college. No siblings, no close relatives. When I said Tommy was family, I meant it more than I've meant anything in years." The vulnerability in his voice made Sarah reach across the table to touch his hand. "He's going to love having a big brother." "Is that what I am? A big brother?" "Well, you're certainly not his father." "What am I to you?" The question was quiet, almost tentative, and it made Sarah's heartbeat quicken. "Right now, you're my husband, who made an impossible situation possible." And later, after the 7 months, Sarah studied his face, noting the hope and uncertainty in his expression. "I guess we'll have to see." James turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. "I guess we will." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, hands still linked across the table. Outside the window, Boston was waking up to another autumn day, but inside the east wing of the Beacon Hill mansion, 2 strangers were learning how to be married. Later that afternoon, when Tommy was transferred from the hospital to James's house for his recovery, he took one look at his new medical suite and grinned at Sarah. "This is the coolest recovery room ever. Better than the hospital." "James arranged everything," Sarah said, unable to keep the pride out of her voice. Tommy looked around the room with the careful attention of someone who had spent too much time in medical facilities. "Sarah, this isn't just medical equipment. This is someone creating the perfect healing environment." "What do you mean?" "Look around. The windows face east for morning light. The entertainment system is positioned so I can watch while lying down or sitting up. The chair for you is positioned so you can reach me but also see outside. Someone thought about every detail of how recovery actually works." Sarah looked around the room with new eyes, seeing what Tommy had noticed immediately. Every element had been chosen not just for medical necessity, but for psychological comfort. He really did think of everything. "Sarah, this isn't business. This is love. Tommy, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing, and what I observe is a man who spent time and money and careful thought creating the perfect environment for your brother's recovery." Sarah sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, smoothing his blanket automatically. "It's complicated. Love usually is. This isn't love. This is gratitude, maybe. And partnership." Tommy gave her the look that meant he was about to say something she didn't want to hear. "Sarah, I'm 16, not 6. I know the difference between gratitude and the way James looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. How does he look at me? Like someone who found something he didn't know he was looking for." Before Sarah could respond, James appeared in the doorway with a tray of food from Tommy's post-surgery diet plan. "How's the patient feeling?" "Like someone who just got the best recovery room in Boston," Tommy said. "Thank you, James. This is amazing." "You're welcome. Sarah, I talked to Dr. Martinez about the medication schedule. I thought I could handle the night shift so you can get some sleep." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You want to do Tommy's overnight medical monitoring?" "I read the protocols. It's mostly checking vitals and medication timing. I can handle it." "James, you don't have to." "Sarah, we're family now. Family takes care of each other." Tommy caught Sarah's eye and mouthed the words, "I told you so." That evening, as James carefully recorded Tommy's vital signs and medication schedule with the precision of someone who had thoroughly studied post-transplant care, Sarah realized her brother might be right. This wasn't feeling like business anymore. The following week, Sarah stood in the dressing room of Boston's most expensive boutique, staring at herself in a midnight blue gown that cost more than she used to make in a month. The Heart Foundation Gala was tomorrow night, and James had insisted on providing her with appropriate attire. "You look beautiful," James said from outside the dressing room. "I look expensive. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Sarah emerged from the dressing room, and James's expression shifted to something she couldn't quite identify. He looked at her with the focused attention of someone seeing something unexpected. "Sarah, you're stunning." The compliment made her cheeks warm. "It's the dress." "It's not the dress." The saleswoman, who had been hovering nearby, clapped her hands together. "Mr. Mitchell, your wife looks absolutely radiant. This gown was made for her." "We'll take it," James said immediately. "James, you haven't even asked the price." "I don't care about the price. 2 hours later, they sat in James's car outside the boutique, surrounded by shopping bags containing not just the gala gown, but several other outfits suitable for the various social functions they would need to attend. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up," Sarah admitted. "You feel like you're stepping into a different world. Is that what this is? For the next 7 months? Yes. But Sarah, you belong in any world you choose to enter." His confidence in her was both reassuring and terrifying. "James, what if I say the wrong thing tomorrow night? What if I embarrass you?" James pulled over and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, you're a registered nurse who has spent the last 8 years caring for your brother while working multiple jobs. You've managed medical crises, financial emergencies, and family responsibilities that would break most people. You're not going to be embarrassed by a charity gala. But I don't know the rules. The rules are simple. Be yourself. Be genuine. Let people see why I fell for you." The phrase, "fell for you," made Sarah's heartbeat quicken. They were supposed to be pretending, but something in James's tone suggested the line between pretense and reality was becoming increasingly blurred. "What if people ask how we met? We tell them the truth. You worked for me. I admired you from a distance. And when you needed help, I realized I wanted to be the person who could provide it. That makes you sound like a knight in shining armor. And it makes you sound like someone worth rescuing." "I didn't need rescuing. I needed a kidney for my brother." James smiled. "Same thing in the end." The next evening, Sarah stood beside James in the ballroom of Boston's most prestigious hotel, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer wealth surrounding them. The Heart Foundation Gala attracted the city's medical and business elite, and the combined net worth in the room probably exceeded the GDP of small countries. But within 20 minutes, Sarah realized that James had been right about her belonging here. Her nursing background gave her natural credibility with the medical professionals, and her genuine interest in cardiac health technology made her a surprisingly effective advocate for the Foundation's mission. Mrs. Mitchell, Dr. Patricia Hennessy from Massachusetts General, approached them during cocktail hour. "Your husband tells me you're a cardiac nurse. What do you think of the new monitoring systems we've been piloting?" Sarah launched into a detailed discussion of patient care protocols, and James watched with undisguised pride as she commanded the attention of some of Boston's most prominent physicians. "She's remarkable," Dr. Hennessy told James when Sarah stepped away to get a drink. "How did you get so lucky?" "I honestly have no idea," James replied, meaning it completely. Later, during dinner, Sarah found herself seated between James and Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the head of pediatric cardiology at Boston Children's Hospital. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband's company has made tremendous contributions to our pediatric cardiac unit," Dr. Rodriguez said. "The monitoring equipment has revolutionized how we care for children with heart conditions. James is passionate about making technology accessible to the patients who need it most," Sarah replied naturally. "And you, what drew you to cardiac nursing?" Sarah glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly. "My brother was born with a congenital heart defect. I spent my childhood in pediatric cardiac units, watching nurses provide not just medical care, but emotional support for entire families. It seemed like the most important work anyone could do." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. "And now you're married to someone whose work directly supports that mission. That must be incredibly fulfilling." "It is," Sarah said, surprised to realize she meant it. When the formal presentations began, James took Sarah's hand under the table. She looked at him questioningly, but he simply squeezed gently. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For being perfect at this." Sarah squeezed back. "We make a good team." "We do, don't we?" The foundation president took the podium to announce the evening's donation totals and recognize major contributors. When James's name was called as the largest corporate sponsor, he stood to acknowledge the applause, bringing Sarah with him. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president continued, "I'd like to recognize not just Heart Tech Solutions' financial contribution, but the personal commitment that Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell have shown to our mission. Mrs. Mitchell's nursing expertise has already provided invaluable insights for our patient care protocols." The applause continued, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just about playing a role anymore. She was genuinely contributing to something meaningful. After the gala, in the car ride home, James was quiet for several minutes. "You were incredible tonight," he finally said. "I just talk to people about things I care about. That's exactly why you were incredible. Sarah, you have a gift for making people feel heard and understood. It's just nursing training." "No, it's not. It's who you are." They drove through the quiet Boston streets, both processing the evening's success. "James, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When Dr. Hennessy asked how you got so lucky, what were you thinking?" James was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if he was going to answer. "I was thinking that I don't deserve you, but I'm grateful beyond words that you're here." The honesty in his voice made Sarah's chest tighten. "James, I know this is supposed to be business, Sarah, but tonight, watching you shine in that room, seeing how naturally you fit into every conversation, it didn't feel like business." Sarah turned to look at his profile in the dim car light. "What did it feel like?" "Like I was the luckiest man in Boston." They pulled into the mansion's driveway, and Sarah realized she didn't want the evening to end. "Would you like to come up for coffee? Check on Tommy?" "I'd like that." Tommy was awake when they entered his recovery room, reading on his tablet with the contentment of someone whose body was finally beginning to heal. "How was the fancy party?" he asked. "Your sister was the star of the evening," James said, settling into the chair beside Tommy's bed. "Of course she was. Sarah's amazing in any room she enters." "Tommy," Sarah protested, but she was smiling. "I'm serious. How did the fancy rich people react to meeting a real nurse?" "They loved her," James said simply. "Everyone wanted to talk to her." Tommy grinned at Sarah. "And how did it feel, being married to Boston's most eligible bachelor?" Sarah glanced at James, who was watching her carefully. "It felt natural," she admitted. "Easier than I expected." "See," Tommy said to James, "I told you she'd be perfect at this." "You did indeed." "Tommy, when did you tell James I'd be perfect at this?" "Yesterday, when you were taking your nap. We had a conversation about how oblivious you are." "Oblivious to what?" Tommy and James exchanged a look that made Sarah suspicious. "Nothing important," James said quickly. "Tommy, how are you feeling? Any discomfort?" "Nice change of subject," Tommy observed, "but I'm feeling great, better than I've felt in 2 years." Sarah checked Tommy's vitals and medication schedule, noting with satisfaction that everything looked perfect. James watched her work with quiet attention, occasionally handing her items before she asked for them. "You two have this routine figured out," Tommy commented. "We're learning," Sarah replied. "Learning what?" "How to be a family," James said quietly. Tommy smiled. "I think you've got it figured out better than you realize." Later, after Tommy had fallen asleep and James had gone to his own room, Sarah sat in her small living area, processing the evening. The gala had felt like a preview of what her life might be like if she really were married to James Mitchell. Professional partnership, social success, shared purpose. It had felt, she realized, like exactly the life she never knew she wanted. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. 3 weeks into Tommy's recovery, Dr. Martinez declared the transplant a complete success. Tommy's new kidney was functioning perfectly. His energy levels were returning to normal, and his color had improved dramatically. "This is the best post-transplant progress I've seen in years," Dr. Martinez told Sarah and James during Tommy's follow-up appointment, "Whatever you're doing at home is working perfectly." "James has been incredible," Sarah said, squeezing her husband's hand automatically. "He's learned every aspect of post-transplant care." "I had excellent teachers," James replied, looking at Sarah with an expression that made Dr. Martinez smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I have to say, family support is crucial for transplant success, and Tommy has the best support system I've ever seen." After the appointment, they took Tommy to his favorite diner to celebrate. Watching her brother eat a full meal for the first time in months, Sarah felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she said to James across the diner table. "For what?" "For giving him his life back." "Sarah, we gave him his life back." "This was a team effort." Tommy looked up from his burger. "You two know you sound like an actual married couple, right?" "Tommy," Sarah warned, "I'm serious. You finish each other's sentences. You have inside jokes." "James knows how you take your coffee, and Sarah knows when James is stressed before he does." "We've been living together for 3 weeks," Sarah said. "It's natural to develop routines." "It's natural to develop feelings," Tommy countered. James and Sarah looked at each other across the table, and something passed between them that neither was ready to name. "Tommy, eat your vegetables," Sarah said, deflecting. "I'm 16, not 6. You can't distract me with parenting." "I can try." After lunch, they walked through Boston Common, Tommy moving with energy that had been absent for months. James and Sarah fell into step beside each other, their hands brushing occasionally as they walked. "He looks healthy," James observed. "He looks happy," Sarah replied. "I haven't seen him this animated since before he got sick." "Having a future will do that." Sarah glanced at James. "Is that what he has now? A future?" "Sarah, he has every future he wants. College, career, family of his own someday. The transplant gave him all of that. The transplant gave him the opportunity. You gave him the transplant. We gave him the transplant." Tommy, who had been walking ahead of them, stopped and turned around. "Okay, I need to say something, and you both need to listen." Sarah and James stopped walking, recognizing Tommy's serious tone. "For 2 years I've been sick, really sick, and for 2 years Sarah has been taking care of me, working 2 jobs, giving up her own life to keep me alive." "Tommy, that's what family does," Sarah started. "Let me finish. And 3 weeks ago, this man," Tommy pointed at James, "married my sister to pay for my surgery. But here's what I've observed since then." Tommy paused for dramatic effect, a skill he'd perfected during his months of medical treatment. "James didn't just pay for surgery. He learned everything about kidney transplants. He redesigned part of his house to create the perfect recovery environment. He took over my night care so Sarah could sleep. He comes to every medical appointment. He researches my dietary needs and makes sure our kitchen is stocked with exactly the right foods." "Tommy, where are you going with this?" Sarah asked. "I'm going toward the obvious conclusion that you're both too stubborn to admit. This stopped being a business arrangement about 2 weeks ago." James and Sarah looked at each other, both recognizing the truth in Tommy's observation. "Tommy, it's complicated," James said. "No, it's not. You love each other. Sarah, you light up when James walks into a room. James, you watch Sarah like she's the most fascinating person you've ever met. You take care of each other automatically, without thinking about it." "Even if that were true," Sarah said carefully, "our arrangement has an end date. Arrangements have end dates. Marriages don't have to." The simple statement hung in the autumn air between them. "Tommy, we agreed to 7 months, James said quietly. "You agreed to 7 months of pretending to be married. But what if you don't have to pretend anymore?" Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a possibility she hadn't allowed herself to consider. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you stop overthinking and start feeling, both of you." They walked home in contemplative silence, Tommy's words echoing in both their minds. That evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Sarah found James in his study, working on legal documents for the ongoing patent case. "How's the lawsuit going?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Better, actually. Margaret thinks having you at public events has helped demonstrate stability. The judge seems to be taking our case more seriously." "That's good news." "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret agreeing to our arrangement?" The question surprised her with its vulnerability. "No." "Do you?" "Not for a second." They looked at each other across the desk, both recognizing that something fundamental had shifted between them. "James, Tommy said something today about feelings." "I heard him." "Were we being dishonest with ourselves when we said this was just business?" James set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Sarah, I told you I fell for you 18 months ago when I first saw you at the hospital. That part was never business, and now I wake up looking forward to morning coffee with you. I come home hoping you'll be there. I watch you with Tommy and think about what kind of mother you'll be someday. I see you at business events and feel proud that people think you're my wife." Sarah's heartbeat quickened. "James, I know we said 7 months. I know we agreed this was temporary. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling temporary to me." Sarah stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where Tommy had been reading that afternoon. "I've been thinking the same thing," she admitted quietly. "You have." "I've been thinking about what happens in 4 months when our contract ends. And I've been thinking that I don't want it to end." James joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What do we do with that information?" "I don't know. We agreed to business partners. Business partners don't usually hold hands during medical appointments. Business partners don't usually learn each other's coffee preferences. Business partners don't usually create inside jokes and finish each other's sentences." Sarah turned to face him, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. "James, what if Tommy's right? What if we're overthinking this? What if we're not? What if we're just grateful and confused and mistaking intensity for something else? What if we're not mistaking anything?" James reached up to touch her face gently. "Sarah, I can't tell the difference between gratitude and love anymore. All I know is that the thought of you leaving in 4 months makes me feel like I can't breathe." "I know. I feel the same way." They stood there in the quiet study, surrounded by legal documents and business papers, recognizing that their carefully constructed arrangement had become something neither had planned for. "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered. "I think," James said softly, "we stop pretending this is temporary and start admitting it feels permanent." "Is that what you want?" "Sarah, it's what I've wanted since the day I married you in that hospital chapel." Before Sarah could respond, James leaned down and kissed her gently. It was their first real kiss, soft and tentative, and full of months of suppressed longing. When they separated, Sarah smiled. "Well, that didn't feel like business." "No, it didn't." "What felt like?" James smiled back, his hands still framing her face. "It felt like coming home." The following Monday, Sarah accompanied James to Heartech Solutions for a crucial board meeting about the patent lawsuit. She had offered to provide nursing perspectives on the disputed cardiac monitoring technology, and James had gratefully accepted her expertise. Walking into the modern glass building that housed James's company, Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. This was James's professional world, where he was respected and successful, and she was about to insert herself into complex business discussions. "You'll be fine," James assured her as they rode the elevator to the 20th floor. "Just be yourself. What if the board members think it's weird that you brought your wife to a legal strategy meeting? Sarah, you're a cardiac nurse with 8 years of experience. Your insights are professionally valuable, not just personally supportive. The Heartech conference room was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor and a table that could seat 20 people. This morning, it held James's legal team, his business partners, and several board members, all preparing for the next phase of the patent dispute. Margaret Walsh, James's attorney, stood to make introductions. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah Mitchell, James's wife. Sarah is a registered nurse specializing in cardiac care, and she's agreed to provide clinical perspective on our monitoring systems." Dr. Robert Chen, Heartech's chief medical officer, shook Sarah's hand warmly. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're grateful for your expertise. The nursing perspective is crucial for understanding how our technology actually functions in patient care settings." For the next 2 hours, Sarah found herself in detailed technical discussions about cardiac monitoring protocols, patient interface design, and clinical workflow integration. Her nursing experience provided insights that the business and legal teams hadn't considered. "The key difference," Sarah explained to the room, "is that nurses interact with this technology during 12-hour shifts, often in emergency situations. We need interfaces that are intuitive under stress, not just comprehensive during calm moments." James watched with undisguised pride as Sarah commanded the attention of some of Boston's sharpest business minds. "Mrs. Mitchell," said board member Patricia Williams, "your husband's competitor claims their device offers superior patient monitoring. From a nursing perspective, what's your assessment?" Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing comparison charts she'd prepared. "Their device might look impressive in marketing materials, but it has critical flaws for actual patient care. The alarm system is too sensitive, creating false emergencies that exhaust nursing staff. The interface requires multiple screen navigations for basic information that nurses need instantly." Margaret leaned forward with interest. "Can you document these operational differences?" "I already have. I've prepared clinical workflow analyses comparing both systems based on real nursing scenarios." The room went quiet as Sarah presented her analysis. Her documentation was thorough, professionally presented, and devastating to their competitors' patent claims. "Mrs. Mitchell," Margaret said slowly, "this analysis could be the foundation of our entire defense strategy." "Really? You've just provided evidence that their technology, while superficially similar, is fundamentally different in practical application. That's exactly what we need to prove the patent claims are invalid." James reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand under the table. "Sarah, you might have just saved Heartech." After the meeting, James and Sarah stood alone in his office while the legal team continued their discussions in the conference room. "I can't believe you prepared all that analysis without telling me," James said. "I wanted to make sure it was actually helpful before I mentioned it." "Sarah, it's not just helpful, it's brilliant." James pulled her into his arms, spinning her around his office while she laughed. "We did it," he said, setting her down. "We actually did it. Sarah, you just used your professional expertise to solve my company's biggest problem. This was absolutely a team effort. I just applied nursing knowledge to a business situation. You just proved that we're perfect partners in every possible way." The word partners hung between them, carrying implications far beyond business collaboration. "James, what happens now with the lawsuit? Now Margaret builds our defense around your clinical analysis. She thinks the case could be resolved within months instead of years. And Heartech. Heartech survives and thrives thanks to my brilliant wife." The word wife had started to feel less like a role and more like an identity. "James, I have to confess something." "What?" "I loved being part of this, working with you, contributing to something meaningful, being partners in solving important problems." James studied her face carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I don't want this to end in 3 months. Not the marriage, not the partnership, not any of it." James's expression shifted to something Sarah had never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Sarah, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I want to make this real. Not a 7-month contract, but an actual marriage, an actual partnership." James framed her face with his hands, looking at her like she'd just offered him everything he'd ever wanted. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." "What about Tommy?" Sarah smiled. "Tommy's been telling us we were perfect for each other since week 1. He's going to be insufferably smug about being right." "And what about you? Are you ready to be married to a workaholic CEO who had to learn how to make coffee? Are you ready to be married to a nurse who will always put patient care ahead of social events?" "Sarah, I'm ready to be married to you however you come, even if I insist on working, on maintaining my nursing career, especially if you insist on that. Watching you work today, seeing how brilliant you are in your field, Sarah, I want to support your career, not replace it." Sarah felt something settle into place in her chest, a sense of rightness she'd never experienced before. "James Mitchell, are you proposing to me?" "Sarah Mitchell, I'm proposing to stay married to you." "That's the best proposal I've ever received. It's the only proposal you've ever received, which makes it automatically the best." They kissed in James's office, surrounded by the papers and prototypes that represented his life's work, and Sarah realized that somewhere along the way, she'd started thinking of it as their life's work. When they separated, James smiled at her with complete contentment. "So what do we tell people about our marriage now?" "We tell them the truth. We started as business partners and discovered we were perfect life partners." "And Tommy," Sarah laughed. "We tell Tommy he was right all along and prepare for weeks of 'I told you so.' I can live with that." "Good, because I have a feeling you're going to be hearing it a lot." That evening, they sat with Tommy in his recovery room, sharing the news of their decision to make their marriage permanent. Tommy listened with growing smugness, then crossed his arms and grinned. "I told you so. We know, T. I told you so 3 weeks ago. We know. I told you that you were falling for each other, and you both said it was just business. Tommy, we get it. Do you? Because I have been waiting for this moment for weeks." James laughed. "Tommy, we're sorry we doubted your relationship wisdom. You should be. I'm 16, and I figured out you were perfect for each other before either of you did." Sarah hugged her brother carefully, mindful of his still healing incision. "Thank you for being smarter than us. Thank you for finally listening to me. And thank you," James added, "for sharing your sister with me." Tommy's expression grew serious. "James, you know Sarah's the best person in the world, right?" "I do. And you know that if you ever hurt her, I will find a way to make you regret it, even though you're twice my size." "I wouldn't expect anything less." "Good. Then welcome to the family, and for real this time." James felt something warm settle in his chest. For the first time in his adult life, he had a real family. Not just Sarah, but Tommy too, and the possibility of future children and holidays, and the ordinary miracles of people who chose to love each other permanently. "Thank you, Tommy, for everything. Just make her happy, okay?" James looked at Sarah, who was smiling at the interaction between the two most important men in her life. "I plan to spend the rest of my life doing exactly that." 2 months later, Sarah and James had settled into a rhythm of married life that felt both comfortable and exciting. Sarah had begun working part-time at Boston General, while also consulting for Heart Tech on patient care protocols. James had reduced his travel schedule to spend more evenings at home. Tommy, fully recovered and back in school, had become their unofficial relationship counselor and family comedian. But it was the quiet domestic moments that surprised Sarah most. Learning that James sang off-key in the shower, discovering that he read medical journals to better understand her work, watching him develop inside jokes with Tommy that had nothing to do with her. This particular evening, Sarah was reading in their shared living room, a space that had evolved naturally as they spent more time together, while James worked on his laptop nearby. The comfortable silence between them felt like the deepest intimacy she'd ever experienced. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about what our life will look like in 5 years?" Sarah looked up from her book, studying James's face. These conversations about the future had become more frequent as their marriage had shifted from temporary arrangement to permanent commitment. "I think about it all the time." "What do you imagine?" "I imagine Tommy in college, probably studying something that will change the world. I imagine you running a nursing program at a major hospital, revolutionizing patient care. And you? I imagine heart tech becoming a model for how medical technology companies can actually serve patients instead of just shareholders." "That sounds like a pretty perfect life." James closed his laptop and moved to sit beside her on the couch. "Sarah, what if it's not perfect? What if we have problems, disagreements, challenges?" The question was serious, and Sarah recognized that James was thinking about the reality of permanent marriage, not just the romantic fantasy. "Then we'll figure it out together. The same way we figured out Tommy's surgery and your lawsuit and how to be married in the first place. You make it sound simple. James, we've already handled a medical crisis, a legal crisis, and merging 2 completely different lives. I think we can handle whatever comes next." James took her hand, intertwining their fingers automatically. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made Sarah's attention sharpen. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said that first morning, about this being the craziest thing anyone had ever suggested to you." "It was crazy, but it worked. It worked better than either of us expected." James turned to face her fully. "Sarah, marrying you was the smartest thing I've ever done, even when I thought it was just business. But falling in love with you, that's the best thing that's ever happened to me." The simple declaration made Sarah's chest tighten with emotion. "James, I know we've talked about making this permanent, but I want to make sure you understand what that means to me. It means I choose you every day, not because of a contract or an arrangement, but because you're the person I want to build a life with. Even though we started with an impossible situation and a crazy proposal, especially because of that. Sarah, we've proven that we can handle anything together." Sarah leaned over and kissed him softly. "James Mitchell, I choose you too. Every day, for all the days." They were interrupted by Tommy calling from the kitchen. "Are you two having another mushy married moment?" "Mind your own business, T," Sarah called back. "It is my business. You're my family." Tommy appeared in the living room doorway, grinning at them. "Besides, I need to discuss something important with both of you." "What kind of something?" James asked suspiciously. "Well, I've been thinking about college applications, and I realized I need to figure out what last name to use." Sarah blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, James legally adopted me as part of your marriage arrangement, right? So technically I'm Tommy Mitchell now." Sarah looked at James in surprise. "Did you?" "I may have included adoption paperwork in our legal documents," James admitted. "I wanted to make sure Tommy would be covered by my health insurance and have access to college funding." "James, you adopted my brother without telling me." "I adopted our brother," James corrected gently. "And yes, I should have discussed it with you first." Tommy was watching this exchange with delight. "Are you mad at him, Sarah?" Sarah looked between her husband and her brother, both of whom were watching her with slightly anxious expressions. "I'm not mad. I'm overwhelmed." "Good. Overwhelmed or bad overwhelmed?" James asked. "Good overwhelmed. James, you gave Tommy a family name. You made him legally your family. He was already my family in every way that mattered." Tommy flopped into the armchair across from them. "So I can officially call you my big brother now. You can officially call me whatever you want. Cool. Hey, James. Yeah, Tommy. Thanks for marrying my sister. Thanks for letting me. Sarah watched the easy affection between her husband and her brother and felt something settle completely into place in her heart. This was what family looked like when it was chosen rather than obligated. Okay, but seriously, Tommy continued, I need to know about college applications. Should I apply as Tommy Reynolds or Tommy Mitchell? What do you want to use? Sarah asked. Well, Tommy Mitchell sounds pretty impressive, and honestly, having James's name will probably help with financial aid applications. Tommy, James said carefully, you don't need to worry about financial aid. College is covered, regardless of what name you use. All of college. Undergraduate, graduate school if you want it, medical school if that's your path. Education is the best investment a family can make. Tommy stared at James for a long moment. You're going to pay for my college? We're going to pay for your college, James corrected, glancing at Sarah. That's what families do. Even expensive schools, especially expensive schools, if that's where you want to go. Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing this information. James, do you realize you've basically given me a completely different life than I would have had? Tommy, you've given me a completely different life than I would have had too. How? James looked at Sarah, then back at Tommy. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to come home every night. You gave me someone to be proud of. And you gave me a kidney and a college fund and a big brother. I think we both got a pretty good deal. Tommy grinned. The best deal ever. Later that night, after Tommy had gone to bed and Sarah and James were getting ready for sleep, Sarah realized something had shifted again in their relationship. James, when you adopted Tommy, you made a commitment that goes way beyond 7 months. I made a commitment that lasts for the rest of our lives. Are you ready for that? James paused in brushing his teeth to look at her in the bathroom mirror. Sarah, I've been ready for that since the day I watched you read Alice in Wonderland to a sick 16-year-old and realized I was looking at the most genuine person I'd ever seen. Even when you thought it was just business. Especially when I thought it was just business. Because underneath all the practical arrangements, I was hoping it would become exactly what it's become. Sarah moved to stand behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and looking at their reflection in the mirror. What has it become? Home, family, love, everything I didn't know I was looking for. In the mirror, they looked like what they'd become. A couple who had found their way to each other through impossible circumstances and decided to stay. James, I love you. He turned in her arms, smiling with the contentment of someone who had everything he wanted. I love you too, Mrs. Mitchell. Forever, forever. As they settled into bed that night, Sarah realized that their 7-month contract had been the beginning of something permanent, something that would outlast any legal document or business arrangement. They'd started as strangers solving impossible problems. They'd become partners building an impossible life, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. Month 5 of their marriage had brought an unexpected problem: happiness. Sarah found herself forgetting that their arrangement had ever been temporary, forgetting that they had started as strangers, forgetting everything except the daily joy of waking up next to James and falling asleep in his arms. This particular Tuesday morning, she was organizing James's home office for their joint tax filing, humming softly as she sorted through business documents. Their accountant needed everything organized by categories, and Sarah had volunteered to handle the paperwork while James dealt with a heart-tech board crisis. She worked systematically through the filing cabinets, creating neat stacks for business expenses, charitable donations, and medical deductions. Tommy's surgery and follow-up care had created substantial medical documentation, all of which needed proper categorization. Behind a row of legal folders, her fingers encountered something unexpected. A thick manila folder wedged between 2 binders, partially hidden but not completely concealed. The tab was handwritten in James's careful script. Project Heart, Sarah Reynolds. Sarah stared at the folder for a long moment, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Project Heart. And why was her maiden name on a folder in James's office? She pulled the folder free, noting its substantial thickness. Whatever Project Heart contained, it was comprehensive. Sarah opened the folder. The first item was a photograph of her, taken from a distance, walking into Boston Children's Hospital. She was wearing her nurse's uniform, and the timestamp showed the date was 19 months ago, a full month before James had ever hired her as his housekeeper. The second item was another photograph, this one showing her sitting in the blue chair by Tommy's hospital bed, reading aloud. The image was clear enough to see the book in her hands, Alice in Wonderland. Sarah's hands began to shake as she flipped through more photographs. Sarah entering her apartment building, Sarah grocery shopping, Sarah walking Tommy to his dialysis appointments, page after page of surveillance photos spanning 18 months of her life. But the photographs were just the beginning. Behind them, Sarah found copies of her employment records from Boston General, her nursing school transcripts, Tommy's complete medical history, including details that should have been protected by privacy laws, her bank statements, her rental history, her parents' death certificates, a complete dossier on Sarah Reynolds and her brother, compiled over 18 months, documenting every aspect of their lives. Sarah sank into James's desk chair, the folder still open in her lap, trying to process what she was seeing. This wasn't casual interest or coincidental observation. This was systematic surveillance. She flipped to the next section and found handwritten notes in James's writing, S. Reynolds, pediatric cardiac nurse, Boston General, 2.5 years experience. Reads to patients Tuesday afternoons. Exceptional bedside manner, natural empathy. Patient families request her specifically. Thomas Reynolds, age 16, end-stage renal disease. Transplant candidate, S. Reynolds' primary caregiver since age 8, following parents' automobile accident. Financial analysis, S. Reynolds' current income $52,000 annually, plus weekend domestic work. Monthly expenses exceed income by approximately $800. Medical insurance covers basic care but not transplant-related expenses. Page after page of notes, analyzing her life with the thoroughness of a business report. Sarah found rental applications for her apartment, applications she'd never seen before, suggesting James had somehow accessed her rental history. Employment verifications she'd never authorized, medical records that should have been confidential. And at the very back of the folder, she found what looked like a strategic plan. Objective: create opportunity for sustained interaction with S. Reynolds. Method: offer employment position requiring regular access to home environment. Timeline: establish trust over 12 to 18 months, then create situation requiring financial assistance. Outcome: position self as solution to financial crisis, creating obligation and sustained contact. Sarah read the document 3 times before its implications fully registered. James hadn't hired her as a housekeeper because he needed household help. He'd hired her because he wanted access to her life. Their marriage contract hadn't been a desperate solution to mutual problems. It had been the culmination of 18 months of careful planning. Everything, their meeting, their arrangement, even Tommy's surgery, had been orchestrated. Sarah heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the folder, but she couldn't hide it completely before James appeared in the office doorway. "How's the filing going?" he asked, then stopped when he saw her face. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Sarah held up the folder, her voice barely steady. "What is Project Heart?" James went completely still, his eyes fixed on the manila folder in her hands. All color drained from his face. "Sarah, I can explain." "Can you? Because what I'm looking at appears to be 18 months of surveillance. Photos of me that I never knew were being taken. Medical records that you shouldn't have access to. Financial information that's supposed to be private. James stepped into the office, closing the door behind him, his movements careful and deliberate. "Sarah, please let me explain what you're looking at. I'm looking at proof that you've been stalking my family for a year and a half." "No, that's not—" "Then what is it, James?" Sarah stood up, the folder clutched against her chest. "Because this looks like you researched every aspect of our lives, figured out exactly when we'd be desperate enough to accept help, and then positioned yourself to be our savior." James ran his hands through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely panicked. "Sarah, yes, I had you researched, but not for the reasons you think." "Then tell me the reasons." "I fell in love with you 18 months ago. The first time I saw you reading to Tommy, I felt something I'd never experienced before, but I didn't know how to approach you. So you hired a private investigator. So I tried to understand who you were, what your life was like, whether you might ever be interested in someone like me." Sarah flipped open the folder again, pointing to the financial analysis. "This isn't trying to understand me, James. This is calculating exactly how much money it would take to buy me. That's not what this is, isn't it? You documented our financial struggles down to the dollar. You tracked Tommy's medical condition. You identified the exact moment when we'd be desperate enough to accept any offer. Sarah, I admit the research was extensive, but my feelings for you were genuine." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Genuine, James. You engineered our entire relationship. You created a job I didn't know I was being interviewed for. You waited until Tommy needed surgery to offer help. You manipulated every aspect of our connection. The feelings weren't manipulated. How would I know? How can I tell the difference between genuine emotion and sophisticated planning?" James moved closer, his voice desperate. "Sarah, I know this looks bad." "Bad, James? This looks like you decided you wanted me and then spent 18 months figuring out how to acquire me." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you treated me like a business acquisition. Market research, financial analysis, strategic planning, successful execution. Sarah, please, did you ever think about asking me on a date? About introducing yourself at the hospital, about treating me like an actual person instead of a target for acquisition?" James was quiet for a long moment. "I was afraid you'd say no. So you decided to remove my choice entirely." "No, I decided to create circumstances where you might choose yes." Sarah stared at him, recognizing the difference in their perspectives. "James, don't you understand? You didn't create circumstances for me to choose you. You created circumstances where I couldn't afford to refuse you. That's not what I intended, but it's what you did." Sarah moved toward the office door, still holding the folder. "Sarah, where are you going?" "I need to think. Please don't leave. We can work through this." Sarah turned back to face him, and James saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten with fear. "James, how can I trust anything about our relationship when it's all built on surveillance and manipulation? Because the love is real. Sarah, everything else might have been planned, but the way I feel about you is completely genuine. But you never gave me the chance to feel the same way naturally. You engineered every moment we've shared. Not every moment. Our first conversation about Tommy, you already knew everything about his condition. Our marriage proposal, you knew exactly how desperate I was. Our partnership at Hearttech, you knew my nursing background would be valuable." James realized she was right, and the recognition was devastating. "Sarah, I may have planned our meeting, but I couldn't have planned falling in love with you more every single day. How do I know that? How do I know if what you feel is love or just satisfaction at a successful acquisition?" The question hung in the air between them, and James realized he didn't have an answer that would satisfy either of them. "I don't know how to prove it to you." "Neither do I." Sarah opened the office door, then paused. "James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the absolute truth." "Of course. Would you have paid for Tommy's surgery if I hadn't agreed to marry you?" James hesitated for just a moment that confirmed Sarah's worst fears. I don't know." The honesty was brutal and final. "Then you used my brother's life as leverage to get what you wanted." "Sarah, that's exactly what it was." Sarah left the office, closing the door quietly behind her, leaving James alone with the opened folder and the wreckage of everything they'd built together. In the hallway, Sarah leaned against the wall, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd discovered. Every conversation, every moment of growing trust, every intimate confession had been built on a foundation of deception. She thought about their first kiss, which had felt like the beginning of something real. She thought about their decision to make their marriage permanent, which had felt like choosing love over convenience. All of it had been built on James's careful manipulation of her circumstances. Sarah walked to Tommy's room, where her brother was doing homework at his desk, healthy and strong and completely unaware that his recovery had come at the cost of everything she'd believed about her marriage. "Hey," Tommy said, looking up from his textbook. "You look upset. Everything okay?" Sarah looked at her brother, her healthy, thriving, alive brother, and realized she was about to lose the only family she had left, because she couldn't stay married to someone who had used Tommy's life as a bargaining chip, no matter how much she loved him. And despite everything she'd discovered, despite the surveillance and the manipulation and the systematic deception, she did love James, which made everything infinitely worse. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Sarah sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, trying to figure out how to explain that their perfect life was built on lies. "T.E., we need to talk." The conversation with Tommy lasted 3 hours and broke both their hearts. Sarah showed him everything. The photographs, the surveillance reports, the financial analysis, the strategic planning documents. She watched her 16-year-old brother process the information with the same devastating clarity that had hit her in James's office. "Oh my gosh," Tommy whispered, staring at photos of himself taken without his knowledge. "He was watching us for over a year. He says he fell in love with me and didn't know how to approach me naturally. So he decided to manipulate our entire lives instead." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of that truth settle between them. "Tommy, I'm so sorry. I brought this into our family. I trusted him without enough questions." "Sarah, you couldn't have known. No one investigates their employer for secret surveillance, but I should have wondered why a wealthy CEO wanted to marry his housekeeper. I should have questioned his motivations more carefully." Tommy was quiet for several minutes, flipping through the documentation with growing anger. "Sarah, this isn't just surveillance. This is stalking." "I know. He knows our parents' death certificates. He has copies of your nursing school grades. He documented your work schedule at the hospital. He documented everything, and then he used all of it to create the perfect scenario to get what he wanted." Tommy closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. "What are you going to do?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question for hours. "I don't know, T. Part of me knows I should leave. This level of manipulation and deception, it's not healthy. It's not the foundation for a real marriage. But you're healthy because of him. You have a future because of his money. You have college funding and health insurance and a legal family name. Sarah, you can't stay married to someone who manipulated you just because he helped me." "Can't I? What if leaving him means you lose access to all the medical support and financial security?" Tommy stood up from his desk and came to sit beside her on the bed. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. I am 16 years old. I have a healthy kidney and a strong body and a smart brain. Whatever happens with your marriage, I'm going to be okay. But the college funding, the health insurance, I'll figure it out. Other kids do it without wealthy stepbrothers. I can too. Sarah looked at her brother, seeing the maturity that his medical struggles had forced on him too early. Tommy, I don't want you to have to figure it out. I want you to have every opportunity. And I don't want you to stay in a marriage built on lies and manipulation. They sat in silence, both recognizing the impossible choice Sarah was facing. What does your heart tell you? Tommy asked quietly. My heart tells me I love him. Despite everything, despite the surveillance and the manipulation, I genuinely love James Mitchell. And what does your brain tell you? My brain tells me that love isn't enough if it's built on deception, that I can't trust my own feelings because I don't know what was natural and what was engineered. So, what are you going to do? Sarah took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to step off the edge of the world. I'm going to leave. Are you sure? No. But I'm sure I can't stay. That evening, Sarah packed her belongings while James waited in his study, respecting her need for space, but hoping she might change her mind. Tommy helped her fold clothes and gather books, both of them moving with the quiet efficiency of people who had packed for uncertain futures before. Where will we go? Tommy asked. Back to the apartment, I suppose. I never gave up the lease. What about your job at Heartech? I'll resign. I can't work with him after this. Sarah, that's not fair to you. You love that work. I can find other work. But not work that matters as much to you. Sarah paused in her packing, recognizing the truth in Tommy's observation. Her consulting work at Heartech had been the most professionally fulfilling experience of her career. Sometimes we have to give up things we love when staying would cost us too much. And what would staying cost you? Sarah looked around the beautiful room that James had created for her, thinking about the life they'd built together over 5 months. My ability to trust my own judgment, my confidence that I'm valued for who I am rather than what I can provide. My belief that love should be freely given, not strategically acquired. Those are important things. They're everything, T. An hour later, their bags were packed and waiting by the door. Sarah walked to James's study and knocked softly. Come in. James was sitting at his desk, not working, just staring out the window at the garden where Tommy had spent so many afternoons reading during his recovery. We're leaving now, Sarah said quietly. James turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that looked like devastation. Sarah, please reconsider. What we have is real, regardless of how it started. How can I know that? How can I trust that any of my feelings are genuine when everything was manipulated? Because manipulation can create opportunity, but it can't create love. Can't it? When you control every aspect of someone's choices, when you engineer their desperation and then position yourself as their salvation, what's the difference between love and Stockholm Syndrome? James had no answer for that. Sarah, I know I made terrible mistakes, but I also know that what I feel for you is the most genuine emotion I've ever experienced. And what I feel for you might be the result of 18 months of psychological manipulation. Do you really believe that? Sarah studied his face, seeing genuine pain and confusion and desperation. I don't know what I believe anymore, James. That's the problem. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wedding ring, setting it on his desk. I can't wear this anymore. Sarah, please don't do this. I have to. I can't build a life with someone who thought the best way to win my love was to engineer my desperation. What about Tommy? What about his health insurance, his college fund? Tommy and I will figure it out. Sarah, you don't have to sacrifice his future to prove a point. I'm not proving a point. I'm choosing dignity over security. The simple statement hit James like a physical blow. I never wanted you to have to choose between those things. But you created a situation where I did. Sarah moved toward the door, then turned back for one final statement. James, I want you to know that I did love you. Whatever was real between us, whatever wasn't calculated or manipulated, I loved that part completely. Sarah. But I can't love someone who loves me so little that they think manipulation is an acceptable way to win my affection. That's not what I thought. That's exactly what you thought. You thought I wouldn't choose you freely, so you made sure I couldn't afford to refuse you. James opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, recognizing the truth in her words. You're right. The admission was quiet and devastating. I know I am. That's why I'm leaving. Sarah walked to the door, then paused one more time. James, what you did wasn't love. It was possession, and I won't be possessed, no matter how comfortable the cage. She left his study, collected Tommy and their bags, and walked out of the Beacon Hill mansion that had felt like home for 5 months. In the taxi driving back to their old apartment, Tommy took her hand. Are you okay? No, but I will be. Do you regret it, any of it? Sarah thought about the question as Boston passed by outside the taxi window. I regret trusting someone who didn't trust me enough to let me choose him freely. But I don't regret the time we had, or the fact that you're healthy, or even the fact that I loved him. Even though it was built on lies, even though it started with lies, it became something real for me. And that's worth something, even if it wasn't enough to save us. Tommy squeezed her hand. Sarah, you did the right thing. Did I? Or did I just destroy the best thing that ever happened to us? You chose self-respect over financial security. That's always the right thing. Sarah leaned back against the taxi seat, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. I hope so, T. I really hope so. Behind them, in the Beacon Hill mansion, James Mitchell sat alone in his study, staring at the wedding ring Sarah had left on his desk and realizing that he had lost the most important thing in his life because he'd never learned the difference between earning someone's love and buying it. 2 weeks after Sarah and Tommy moved back to their old apartment, James received devastating news that forced him to confront the full consequences of his actions. Margaret Walsh called him on a Thursday morning with an update about the patent lawsuit that should have been good news. James, I have some unexpected developments in the Chen case. Good or bad unexpected? Both. The good news is that Sarah's clinical analysis was so compelling that Chen's legal team has approached us about settlement. James felt a brief moment of hope. That's excellent. The bad news is that they're requiring your personal testimony about how you obtained the clinical insights. They want to verify that your nursing consultant had legitimate expertise and wasn't just providing biased analysis. What does that mean? It means they want to depose Sarah. They want her on record explaining her clinical methodology and confirming her independence from HeartTech's business interests. James's heart sank. Margaret, Sarah no longer works with HeartTech. What do you mean? She resigned after our personal situation changed. Margaret was quiet for a moment. James, please tell me you didn't have a romantic relationship with a business consultant whose analysis is central to our legal defense. It's more complicated than that. James, how much more complicated? Sarah is my wife, or was my wife. We're separated. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough that James wondered if they'd been disconnected. Margaret. James, please tell me you're joking. I'm not. James, our entire legal strategy is based on independent clinical analysis provided by a nursing expert. If that expert turns out to be your estranged wife, the analysis becomes worthless, but the analysis itself is valid. The analysis might be valid, but it's no longer legally credible. Chen's team will argue that your wife provided biased testimony to help your case. James slumped in his office chair, recognizing the magnitude of what Margaret was telling him. So what happens now? Now we start over. We find new clinical experts, develop new analysis, and prepare for a much longer and more expensive legal battle. How much longer? Months, possibly years. And James, Without Sarah's analysis, our case is significantly weaker. After hanging up with Margaret, James sat alone in his office, staring out at Boston Harbor and contemplating the full cost of losing Sarah. Not just the personal devastation, but the professional consequences that were now becoming apparent. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. "Mr. Mitchell, Tommy missed his follow-up appointment yesterday. Is everything all right?" James realized that in losing Sarah, he'd also lost contact with Tommy, whose ongoing medical care he'd committed to supporting. He tried calling Sarah's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. That afternoon, James drove to Boston General Hospital, hoping to find Sarah during her nursing shift. He found her in the cardiac unit, checking on a patient, moving with the competent grace he'd always admired. "Sarah, can we talk?" She looked up, surprise and wariness crossing her face. "James, what are you doing here?" "Tommy missed his appointment with Dr. Martinez. I wanted to make sure he's okay." "He's fine. We switched to a different nephrologist." "Why?" "Because Dr. Martinez is funded by grants from Heart Tech. We needed care that wasn't connected to you." The practical implications of their separation were becoming clear to James in ways he hadn't anticipated. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about the patent lawsuit. I don't want to hear about your business problems. This affects you too. My legal team needs to depose you about the clinical analysis you provided." Sarah stopped what she was doing and gave him her full attention. "What kind of deposition?" "They need you to testify about your nursing methodology and confirm that your analysis was independent." "But it wasn't independent. I was your wife." "That's the problem. Without your testimony, my legal case collapses." Sarah studied his face, trying to understand why he was telling her this. "James, what are you asking me to do?" "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you that losing you has consequences I didn't anticipate. Are you trying to guilt me into coming back?" "No, I'm trying to explain that my mistakes didn't just hurt you and Tommy. They've destroyed everything I worked for professionally too." Sarah felt an unexpected wave of sympathy, quickly followed by frustration. "James, that's not my problem." "I know, but Sarah, there's something else. And something you should know about Tommy's medical coverage." Sarah's attention sharpened immediately. "What about it?" "His health insurance was through my family policy. When you moved out, he lost coverage." "What?" "I've been paying for his medications and follow-up care out of pocket, but he needs to be on an insurance plan." Sarah felt the familiar panic of medical financial pressure. "How much are his medications?" "About $3,000 monthly." "Oh my gosh." "Sarah, I can keep covering everything, but I thought you should know the situation." Sarah leaned against the hospital corridor wall, feeling trapped by the same medical financial pressure that had led her into James's life in the first place. "You're not trying to manipulate me again, are you?" "No. I'm trying to take responsibility for the fact that my decisions have consequences for people I care about, people you manipulated, people I love." The simple statement hung between them in the busy hospital corridor. "James, I can't do this conversation here." "Then where, Sarah? We need to figure out how to handle Tommy's ongoing care, even if we can't figure out how to handle us. There is no us. There's Tommy, and he needs medical support that I committed to providing." Sarah closed her eyes, recognizing that James was right about Tommy's needs, regardless of their personal situation. "Fine. We can meet this evening to discuss Tommy's medical arrangements. But just about Tommy." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm doing this for my brother, not for you." That evening, James arrived at Sarah and Tommy's apartment with a folder of medical insurance information and a check for Tommy's upcoming college tuition payments. "You don't need to pay for college," Sarah said, letting him into their small living room. "I made a commitment to Tommy's education." "That was when you were married to his sister." "That was when I became his brother. The divorce doesn't change that. Tommy looked up from his homework. Are you two getting divorced? Sarah and James looked at each other, realizing they hadn't actually discussed the legal technicalities of ending their marriage. We're separated, Sarah said carefully, but technically still married, James added. What's the difference? Separated means we're not living together but haven't filed legal papers yet. Divorced means the marriage is legally ended, Sarah explained. So which one are you doing? Sarah looked at James. I don't know. We haven't discussed it. Maybe we should, James said quietly. Maybe we should. Tommy closed his textbook. Can I say something before you two start discussing legal stuff? Of course, Sarah said. James, what you did with the surveillance and manipulation was really wrong. Like, seriously wrong. I know. But Sarah, you've been miserable for 2 weeks, and James, you look terrible. Tommy, Sarah warned, I'm just making observations. You're both clearly miserable without each other. Being miserable doesn't mean we should stay in a marriage built on deception. But does being happy mean you should end a marriage that became real? The question was more sophisticated than either adult was prepared to handle. Tommy, it's not that simple, isn't it? James made terrible mistakes at the beginning, but the last 4 months were real, weren't they? Sarah and James looked at each other across the small living room. Some of it was real, Sarah admitted quietly. Most of it was real, James said. So why can't you build on the real parts and forgive the fake parts? Because trust is fundamental to marriage, Sarah said. And I broke that trust, James acknowledged. But people rebuild trust all the time, Tommy pointed out, if they think the relationship is worth saving. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Tommy, some mistakes are too big to forgive, and some relationships are too important to abandon. James looked at Sarah with something like hope in his expression. Sarah, what if Tommy's right? What if we could find a way to rebuild trust? How? How do I know that anything about our relationship is genuine when it started with 18 months of manipulation? Because the last 4 months weren't manipulated. The last 4 months were us choosing each other every day. Were they? Or were they just the logical conclusion of your strategic planning? James was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, I can't prove to you that my feelings are genuine. But I can prove that I'm willing to prioritize your happiness over my own interests. What does that mean? It means I'm going to do something that will prove I love you more than I love what you can do for me. Sarah looked at him skeptically. What are you talking about? You'll see. James stood up to leave, then turned back to both of them. Tommy, regardless of what happens between Sarah and me, you're my brother. That doesn't change. College is covered. Medical care is covered. Family support is covered. Even if you and Sarah get divorced? Even if Sarah and I get divorced? After James left, Sarah and Tommy sat in their small living room, both processing the conversation. Sarah, can I ask you something? Always. Do you love him? Sarah considered the question carefully. Yes. Despite everything, yes. Does he love you? I think so. But I don't know if that's enough. What would be enough? Sarah looked around their modest apartment, thinking about the mansion they'd left behind, the life they'd built, the future they'd planned. I don't know, I honestly don't know. What Sarah didn't know was that James had already decided what would be enough to prove his love. And it would require him to sacrifice everything he'd worked for to demonstrate that she mattered more than any business success or financial security. The next morning, James Mitchell began the process of dismantling his entire professional life to prove that Sarah Reynolds was worth more than any empire he could build. 18 months after Sarah walked out of the Beacon Hill mansion, she stood in the break room of Boston General Hospital, reading a newspaper article that made her hands shake. HeartTech CEO donates entire company to establish medical emergency foundation, read the headline. The accompanying photo showed James Mitchell signing documents at a press conference, surrounded by doctors and hospital administrators. Sarah read the article twice, trying to process what she was seeing. In an unprecedented move, Heartech Solutions CEO James Mitchell announced yesterday that he is donating his controlling shares in the medical technology company to establish the Tommy Reynolds Foundation for Medical Emergency Assistance. The foundation, valued at approximately $47 million, will provide emergency funding for families facing catastrophic medical expenses, with a primary focus on pediatric care. The article continued with quotes from Dr. Martinez and other physicians praising the foundation's mission. But it was the final paragraph that made Sarah's chest tighten. When asked about his motivation for the donation, Mitchell stated, "My stepson Tommy Reynolds taught me that some things are more valuable than business success." This foundation honors his courage and his sister's sacrifice, and ensures that no family will face the impossible choice between financial security and saving a child's life. Sarah sat down heavily in the break room chair, the newspaper still trembling in her hands. James had given up everything, his company, his wealth, his business legacy, all of it donated to create a foundation in Tommy's name. "Sarah, you look like you've seen a ghost," said Dr. Patricia Hennessy, entering the break room. "I think I have," Sarah replied quietly. Dr. Hennessy glanced at the newspaper. "Oh, you saw the article about the Tommy Reynolds Foundation. Remarkable story, isn't it? You know about the foundation. Sarah, it's the talk of every hospital in Boston. James Mitchell just created the largest emergency medical assistance program in New England. Do you realize how many families this will help?" Sarah did realize, which made everything more complicated. "Dr. Hennessy, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think it's possible for someone to change fundamentally, to go from being manipulative and controlling to being genuinely selfless?" Dr. Hennessy studied Sarah's face carefully. "That's an oddly specific question. Are you asking about someone in particular?" "Maybe. Well, in my experience, people can change when they experience consequences significant enough to force them to confront who they really are. But it requires genuine remorse and a willingness to make sacrifices that prove the change is real." "What kind of sacrifices?" "The kind that cost them everything they thought they wanted in order to get what actually matters." That evening, Sarah sat with Tommy in their small apartment, the newspaper spread between them on the kitchen table. "He actually did it," Tommy said, reading the article for the third time. "We gave up Heartech to create a foundation. I can't believe it. Sarah, do you understand what this means? It means James is broke and unemployed. It means James chose helping other families over keeping his wealth and power." Sarah looked at her brother, noting the wisdom in his expression that continued to surprise her. "Tommy, it's a generous gesture, but it doesn't change what he did to us." "Doesn't it, Sarah? He could have kept his company and still donated money to charity. Rich people do that all the time. But he gave up control of everything he built. Why does that matter? Because it proves he's not the same person who thought manipulation was an acceptable way to get what he wanted." Sarah stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the street where she and Tommy had built their quiet life over the past 18 months. "And even if James has changed, that doesn't mean we can rebuild what we had." "Why not?" "Because trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to repair." "But not impossible." Sarah turned back to face her brother. "Tommy, why are you pushing this? Because you've been miserable for 18 months, because you still love him, and because he just proved that he loves you more than anything else in his life." "How did he prove that?" "Sarah, Heartech was James's entire identity, his life's work, his claim to fame, and he gave it all up to create something that honors our family. That honors you, specifically." That honors us, Sarah. The foundation is named after me, but it exists because James learned from you that some things matter more than business success. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at their apartment door. Tommy and Sarah looked at each other, neither expecting visitors. Sarah opened the door to find Dr. Martinez standing in the hallway, smiling broadly. Dr. Martinez, is everything okay? Everything is wonderful, Sarah. May I come in? I have some news about the Tommy Reynolds Foundation that I think you'll want to hear. Sarah let him in, and Dr. Martinez greeted Tommy with the warmth of someone who had become genuinely fond of his patient. Tommy, you look excellent. How are you feeling? Great, Dr. Martinez, better than I've felt in years. I'm glad to hear that. Sarah, I came by because the foundation officially launched yesterday, and I wanted you both to know what it's already accomplished. Dr. Martinez pulled out a folder of information. In the past week alone, we've been able to approve emergency funding for 12 families. A 7-year-old with leukemia whose parents couldn't afford experimental treatment. Twins born prematurely who needed extended NICU care. A teenager with a rare heart condition requiring surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. Sarah felt something shift in her chest as Dr. Martinez described the families who had already been helped. But here's what I think you'll find most interesting, Dr. Martinez continued. James Mitchell isn't just a donor to this foundation. He's working there full-time as Director of Family Support Services. What does that mean? Tommy asked. It means he personally meets with every family, helps them navigate the application process, and coordinates with hospitals and insurance companies to ensure comprehensive care. Sarah stared at Dr. Martinez. James is working at the foundation. 60 hours a week, from what I can see. Sarah, he's transformed himself from a CEO managing a company to a social worker helping desperate families. That's not what I expected. None of us expected it. But Sarah, I've worked with James Mitchell for the past 6 months, and I can tell you that his commitment to these families is completely genuine. Dr. Martinez paused, then added something that made Sarah's heartbeat quicken. He talks about you and Tommy constantly, not in a way that suggests he's trying to win you back, but in a way that suggests you changed his understanding of what actually matters in life. After Dr. Martinez left, Sarah and Tommy sat in their kitchen, processing this new information. Sarah, he's not just donating money, he's dedicating his life to helping other families like ours. I know. And he's doing it without any expectation that you'll come back to him. How do you know that? Because if he was trying to manipulate you again, he would have contacted us directly. He would have made sure we knew about his sacrifice. Sarah realized Tommy was right. She'd learned about James's foundation donation through a newspaper, not through any direct communication. So what am I supposed to do with this information? Whatever feels right to you. And if I don't know what feels right, then maybe you should go see for yourself what James is doing with his life now. 2 days later, Sarah found herself standing outside the offices of the Tommy Reynolds Foundation, located in a modest building in downtown Boston that was far from the gleaming heart-tech headquarters James used to occupy. Through the window, she could see James sitting at a simple desk, talking to a young couple who both looked exhausted and desperate. The woman was crying, and James was handing her tissues while taking careful notes about their situation. Sarah watched him work, noting how different he looked from the powerful CEO she'd married. His expensive suits had been replaced by simple button-down shirts and khakis. His confident business demeanor had been replaced by gentle, patient attention to the family's story. She listened as James asked detailed questions about their child's condition, their insurance coverage, and their financial situation. His manner was kind but professional, focused entirely on understanding how the foundation could help. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that we're going to take care of Emma's surgery costs, James said quietly. All of it. Surgery, recovery, follow-up care, everything. The couple began crying with relief, and James waited patiently while they processed the information. How can we ever thank you? Mrs. Chen asked. You don't need to thank me. You need to focus on Emma's recovery. We'll handle the rest. After the couple left, James sat alone at his desk for several minutes, making notes in their file and preparing for his next appointment. Sarah realized she could have stood there for hours, watching him work with families facing the same desperation she and Tommy had experienced. Finally, she knocked on the door. James looked up and saw her through the glass. His expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, hope, uncertainty, and something that looked like joy. Sarah, he said, opening the door, I didn't expect to see you. I read about the foundation in the newspaper. Oh, James, can we talk? Of course. Please, come in. The foundation office was small and simply furnished, with family photos on the walls showing children who had been helped by the program. Sarah recognized Tommy's photo among them, displaying his bright smile during his recovery. You have Tommy's picture, she observed. He's our inspiration. The foundation exists because of what I learned from both of you. Sarah looked around the modest space, noting how different it was from James's former executive office. This is quite a change from Heart Tech. It's the best change I've ever made. Sarah sat in the chair that the Chen family had just vacated, looking at James across his simple desk. Dr. Martinez says you work 60 hours a week here. Dr. Martinez exaggerates. It's probably closer to 50. That's still a lot. It's the most meaningful work I've ever done. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation she'd learned to recognize. James, why did you really donate Heart Tech? Because I realized that losing you taught me something I should have learned years ago. What's that? That the only wealth worth having is the kind that comes from helping other people. And the only success worth achieving is the kind that makes other people's lives better. That sounds like something you practice saying. James smiled ruefully. It probably does. But Sarah, it's also true. For the past 18 months, I've been trying to figure out how to prove to you that I changed, and I realized that I don't need to prove anything to you. What do you mean? I mean, I need to prove it to myself. I need to become the person you deserve to fall in love with in the first place. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that the man sitting across from her was fundamentally different from the man she'd left 18 months ago. And have you become that person? I'm trying every day. Sarah, I can't take back the surveillance or the manipulation or the 18 months of engineering our relationship. But I can spend the rest of my life making sure that other families don't face the impossible choices we faced. Other families like us? Families where someone is sick and someone else is desperate, and the healthcare system creates impossible financial barriers. Sarah looked at the wall of photos showing children who had been helped by the foundation. How many families have you assisted? 43 so far, with plans to expand to cover the entire Northeast. That's incredible. It's a start. Sarah, every family I help, I think about you and Tommy. I think about how desperate you must have felt, trying to save your brother with no resources and no options. And you think about how you exploited that desperation. James was quiet for a moment. Yes, I think about that too. James, I need to ask you something. Anything. If I hadn't discovered the surveillance files, would you have told me eventually? Would you have ever been honest about how our relationship started? James considered the question carefully. I don't know, and that uncertainty is part of why I had to change everything about my life. What do you mean? I mean, I had to become someone who would tell the truth even when it was difficult. Someone who would prioritize other people's well-being over my own desires. Someone worthy of the kind of love you offered me. Sarah felt tears starting in her eyes, recognizing the sincerity in James's voice. James, I loved you. Despite everything, despite the manipulation and the lies, I genuinely loved you. I know, and I loved you too, more than I'd ever loved anything in my life. Past tense? James looked directly at her. Sarah, I love you now more than I loved you then, but I also understand why you can't trust that love. Do you? You can't trust it because I never gave you the chance to choose it freely. Everything about our relationship was designed to make you dependent on me. Yes. And now I'm trying to prove that I can love you without needing to possess you. By staying away? By becoming someone worth choosing, and then trusting you to make whatever choice feels right to you. They sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the weight of 18 months of separation and growth. James, can I see what you do here? Can you show me how the foundation works? Of course. For the next 2 hours, James walked Sarah through the foundation's operations. She met staff members who spoke about James with genuine respect and affection. She reviewed case files, showing families who had been helped. She saw financial records proving that every dollar was being used for direct family assistance. Sarah, there's something else I want to show you, James said, leading her to a small conference room. On the wall was a large map of New England, dotted with pins representing families who had received assistance. Each pin represents a child who got medical care they couldn't afford, James explained. Each pin represents a family that didn't have to choose between financial ruin and saving their child's life. Sarah studied the map, overwhelmed by the scope of what James had created. This is incredible. James, you've built something that will help thousands of families. We've built something, James corrected gently. None of this would exist without what I learned from you and Tommy. James, I need to tell you something. What? I'm proud of you. What you've done here, the way you've changed, the families you're helping, I'm genuinely proud of you. James's expression shifted to something Sarah recognized as deep gratitude. That means more to me than you can know. And I need to tell you something else. What's that? I miss you. I've missed you every day for 18 months. Sarah, but missing someone isn't the same as being able to trust them again. I know. And I don't know if I can get past what happened between us. I understand. Sarah looked at the map of helped families, then back at James. But I'd like to try. James went very still. What does that mean? It means I'd like to spend time with you again. Carefully, slowly, with complete honesty about what we're doing and why. Sarah, are you sure? No, I'm not sure about anything. But James, you've proven that you can change. You've proven that you can put other people's needs ahead of your own desires. And maybe that's enough for me to believe that we could build something real this time. What would that look like? I don't know. Maybe we start with coffee. Maybe we have conversations where neither of us is desperate or manipulated or trying to solve impossible problems. I'd like that very much. And maybe, eventually, we figure out if what we felt for each other was genuine love or just the intensity of an impossible situation. And if it was genuine love, then maybe we figure out if it's strong enough to overcome how it started. James stood up from his desk and moved closer to Sarah. Sarah, I want you to know that whatever happens between us, this foundation will continue. Your security and Tommy's future don't depend on whether you choose to give me another chance. I know. That's part of why I'm willing to try. What do you mean? James, 18 months ago, you used Tommy's medical needs as leverage to get what you wanted. Today, you're helping 43 other families with no expectation of personal gain. That transformation is what makes me think we might have a chance. James reached out slowly, giving Sarah time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he took her hand gently. Sarah, I promise you that if we do this, if we try again, I will never manipulate you or engineer situations or try to control your choices. I will trust you to choose me freely or to choose not to. That's all I've ever wanted, the freedom to choose. Then you have it. Completely. They stood in the small conference room of the Tommy Reynolds Foundation, surrounded by evidence of James's transformation and the possibility of their own. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we see if two people who started with impossible circumstances can build something genuine together." That sounds appropriately uncertain and hopeful. It sounds like exactly what we need. 3 months later, Sarah and James sat across from each other in a small coffee shop near Boston Common, having their weekly conversation about everything and nothing. These coffee dates had become the foundation of their careful reconstruction, allowing them to learn each other again without the pressure of contracts or crises. "Tommy got his acceptance letter from MIT, Sarah said, stirring cream into her coffee. "That's fantastic. How does he feel about it?" "Terrified and excited, the usual college combination." "And how do you feel about him going away to school?" Sarah smiled. "Proud, ready. A little sad that my baby brother won't need me as much anymore." "Sarah, he'll always need you, just differently." "I know, it's good different." James watched Sarah talk about Tommy, noting the peace in her expression that had taken months to rebuild. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always. Do you think Tommy would be okay with us seeing each other more frequently?" Sarah looked at James carefully. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had developed slowly, based entirely on conversation and shared time rather than crisis or necessity. "What do you mean by more frequently?" "I mean, maybe dinner sometimes instead of just coffee. Maybe spending time together when we're not specifically discussing our relationship. Like dating." "Like dating." Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. They'd been so careful to avoid rushing anything that the prospect of normal relationship progression felt both exciting and terrifying. "James, are you asking me out?" "Sarah, I'm asking if you're ready to find out whether what we're building together might become something lasting. And if it doesn't, if we try dating and realize we're not compatible outside of crisis situations, then we remain friends who respect each other and co-support Tommy's future." The possibility felt both reasonable and disappointing to Sarah, which she recognized as a good sign about her feelings. "Okay. Okay, you'll think about it. Or okay, you'd like to try." "Okay, I'd like to try." James smiled with the kind of quiet joy that Sarah remembered from their best moments 18 months ago. "Sarah, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night?" "I'd love to. Just dinner, just conversation, just two people learning whether they enjoy each other's company." "James." "Yeah, I already know I enjoy your company." "You do?" "These coffee conversations have been the best part of my week for the past 3 months." "Mine too." 6 months later, Sarah stood in James's new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place near the foundation offices, helping him prepare dinner for Tommy, who was home from MIT for spring break. "I can't believe you actually learned to cook," Sarah said, watching James competently manage multiple dishes. "YouTube is an excellent teacher. Better than I was. Different kind of teaching. You taught me why cooking mattered. YouTube taught me how to not burn everything." Tommy arrived as they were setting the table, looking healthy and happy and every inch the successful college student he'd become. "Something smells amazing," he said, hugging Sarah and then James with equal enthusiasm. "James made his famous chicken parmesan," Sarah said. "Famous? It's the only thing he can cook reliably." "That's not true. I can also make spaghetti and salad." 3 dishes. Very impressive. Tommy watched this easy banter with satisfaction. Over the past year, he'd observed his sister and James slowly rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than desperation. "So," Tommy said, settling at the dinner table, "I have news." "Good news or bad news?" Sarah asked. Good news, mostly, I've been accepted to a summer internship program. Tommy, that's wonderful, James said. Where? Well, that's the interesting part. It's with a medical technology company in California. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. California, Tommy, that's across the country. I know, but it's an incredible opportunity to work on artificial kidney development, the kind of technology that could eliminate the need for transplants entirely. James leaned forward with interest. Tommy, that's exactly the kind of work that could change everything for kidney patients. I know, and I know it's far from home. But Sarah, you've always told me to follow opportunities that could make a difference. Sarah looked at her brother, recognizing that he was ready for adventures she couldn't be part of. You're right. It's an amazing opportunity. Are you sure? Because I don't have to go if you need me here. Tommy Reynolds, you are not passing up your dream internship to babysit your sister. I'm not babysitting. I'm being available for family support. James cleared his throat gently. Tommy, what if Sarah had family support that didn't require you to give up opportunities? Tommy and Sarah both looked at James. What do you mean? Sarah asked. James set down his fork and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small box that made Sarah's breath catch. I mean, what if I asked Sarah to marry me again, for real this time, with no contracts or time limits or business arrangements? Sarah stared at the ring box, her heart racing. James, Sarah, I know this might seem fast, but we've been rebuilding our relationship for 9 months. We've proven that we can be happy together without crisis or manipulation, and I love you more every day. But we're already married, Tommy pointed out practically. Technically, yes, but I want to marry Sarah the right way this time. I want to propose because I can't imagine my life without her, not because I need her for business reasons. Sarah looked between the ring box and James's hopeful face. James, are you sure you want to marry someone who will always put her nursing career first? Someone who will probably never fit perfectly into wealthy social circles? Someone who comes with a brilliant brother who's going to spend summers in California? Sarah, I want to marry someone who taught me what actually matters in life, someone who will challenge me to be better every day, someone whose family has already become my family, even knowing that I'll probably never completely get over how we started, especially knowing that, because it means you'll never let me take our relationship for granted. Sarah opened the ring box to reveal a simple, elegant diamond that was nothing like the expensive rings James used to buy for women he was trying to impress. It's beautiful. It's not extravagant. I don't want extravagant. I want honest. Is that a yes? Sarah looked around the modest apartment where they'd shared so many meals, at Tommy, who was beaming at both of them, at James, who was watching her with nervous hope. Yes, James Mitchell. I'll marry you again. For real this time. For real this time. James slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger, and she realized it fit perfectly, not because it had been sized by expensive jewelers, but because James had learned to pay attention to details that actually mattered. Tommy raised his water glass in a toast to James and Sarah, who proved that sometimes the most impossible situations lead to the most genuine love. To second chances, James added. To first real choices, Sarah finished. 1 year later, Sarah and James renewed their vows in the chapel at Boston Children's Hospital, surrounded by the families whose lives had been changed by the Tommy Reynolds Foundation. Dr. Martinez performed the ceremony. Tommy served as best man, and the hospital's pediatric cardiac unit provided the music. Do you, James Mitchell, take Sarah Reynolds to be your wife, choosing her freely and loving her completely? I do. Do you, Sarah Reynolds, take James Mitchell to be your husband, trusting him fully and loving him completely? I do. Then by the power vested in me and witnessed by the community of families you've served together, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again, The reception was held in the foundation offices, with Tommy delivering a speech that made everyone cry. 3 years ago, I was dying from kidney disease, and my sister was working 2 jobs to keep me alive. Today, I'm a healthy college student. Sarah is married to her best friend, and together they've helped save 67 children's lives through the Tommy Reynolds Foundation. Sometimes impossible situations really do lead to perfect endings. After the reception, Sarah and James stood alone in the foundation conference room, looking at the map that now showed 67 pins representing families they'd helped together. "Any regrets?" James asked, wrapping his arms around Sarah from behind. "About which part? Marrying you the first time, divorcing you, or marrying you again?" "Any of it." Sarah leaned back against James's chest, looking at the evidence of everything they'd built together. "No regrets. Every mistake led us here. Every crisis taught us something we needed to know. Every impossible choice made us stronger. Even the surveillance files. Because they forced us to rebuild our relationship on complete honesty. And now we have what we should have had from the beginning, a partnership based on choice, not necessity. Love based on respect, not desperation." James turned Sarah around to face him. "Mrs. Mitchell, what do you think our life will look like in 5 years?" "Well, let's see. Tommy will have graduated from MIT and probably be running some medical technology company that makes kidney transplants obsolete. Probably. The foundation will have helped hundreds of families and expanded to cover the entire East Coast. At least. And we'll probably have a couple of kids running around, keeping us too busy to remember how impossible everything seemed at the beginning." "Kids," Sarah smiled. "James Mitchell, are you ready to be a father? Only if you're ready to be a mother. I've been practicing for 16 years with Tommy. That's different from having babies of our own. Better or worse different? Better. Definitely better." 2 years later, Sarah sat in the rocking chair in their nursery, nursing their 3-month-old daughter, Emma, while James read to Tommy's son, their nephew visiting from California, where Tommy now worked for the artificial kidney research company. "Aunt Sarah, why did you and Uncle James get married twice?" 5-year-old Michael asked. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes the first time and need to try again to get it right." "Did you get it right the second time?" Sarah looked at James, who was holding Emma with the confident gentleness of someone who had learned that the most precious things in life required the most careful handling. "Yes, sweetheart. We got it right the second time." "How do you know?" "Because this time we chose each other for the right reasons." "What are the right reasons?" James answered before Sarah could. "Because we make each other better people. Because we want to spend our lives helping other families. And because we love each other more every day." "That sounds like really good reasons." "They are," Sarah agreed. "The best reasons." That evening, after Michael had been tucked into bed and Emma was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Sarah and James sat on their couch, looking through the Foundation's annual report. In 5 years, they had helped 237 families, prevented countless medical bankruptcies, and saved dozens of children's lives. "Look at this," James said, pointing to a letter from a family in Vermont. "Remember the Johnsons? Their daughter needed experimental cancer treatment. Emma Johnson. She's 5 now, right? 5 and completely healthy. They sent a photo from her kindergarten graduation." Sarah looked at the photo of a little girl who was alive because the Tommy Reynolds Foundation had covered her medical expenses. "James, do you realize what we've built together? A life worth living. A legacy worth leaving." James pulled Sarah closer on the couch, both of them surrounded by evidence of lives saved and families helped. "Sarah, do you remember what you said that first morning when I proposed the marriage contract? I said you were insane. You said it was the craziest thing anyone had ever suggested to you." "It was. And now, Now, I think it was the best crazy idea either of us ever had. Even knowing everything we'd have to go through to get here, especially knowing everything we'd have to go through. Because we proved that two people can start with impossible circumstances and build something beautiful together. What do you think Tommy would say about how everything turned out? Tommy would say he told us so. He did tell us so, from the very beginning. James kissed Sarah's forehead, tasting the contentment that had taken years to build, but now felt permanent and unshakable. Mrs. Mitchell. Yes, Mr. Mitchell, I love our impossible life. I love our impossible love. Outside their modest home, chosen for its proximity to the foundation offices rather than its prestige address, Boston settled into another autumn evening. Somewhere in the city, families were facing medical crises and impossible financial choices. Tomorrow, Sarah and James would help some of them find solutions, continuing the work that had grown from their own desperate circumstances into something that served hundreds of families each year. In Emma's nursery, their daughter slept peacefully, surrounded by love that had been tested by crisis and strengthened by choice. In California, Tommy Reynolds Mitchell worked on artificial kidney technology that might someday eliminate the need for the kind of medical emergency that had brought his sister and James together. And in their living room, Sarah and James Mitchell held each other on the couch, where they'd spent countless evenings planning foundation initiatives, discussing Emma's development, and marveling at the life they'd built from the ashes of manipulation and desperation. They had started as strangers solving impossible problems. They had become partners creating impossible solutions. Their 7-month contract had lasted a lifetime. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.